We'll call the regular city council meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. Madam Clerk, if you could please call the roll.
Mayor McDaniel.
Here.
Mr. Burmeister.
Here.
Ms. Hammond.
Here.
Mr. Kittle. Here. Mr.
Here.
Knight.
Here.
Ms. Mitchell.
Present.
Ms. Verbecki.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Item 4, approval of the minutes. We've got 4A, it's the regular city council meeting that occurred on May 22nd of 2017. Council, if there aren't any corrections, I would be open for a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Hammond. Do we have support? Support. Supported by Mr. Burmeister. Any further discussion? We're ready to vote.
Ms. Hammond.
Yes.
Mr. Burmeister.
Yes.
Mr. Kittle.
Yes.
Mr. Knight.
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell.
Yes.
Ms. Verbecki.
Yes.
Mayor McDaniel.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Item 5, under appointments and presentations, we have 5A. Director Marzoff from Parks and Recreation, please come forward at this time. And Mr. Stevens, if you'd please come forward at this time as well.
All right. Wait till Jim gets up here. Okay. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm happy to be here tonight for this occasion. And as you can see, I have something very special to present to the Mayor and Council this evening. Recently, Mayor Kevin McDaniel and his teammate, Jim Stevens. Step up here, Jimmy. Yeah, get on there. All right.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council.
Very good, thank you. Participated in the canoe race down the Clinton River as part of the 9th annual Paddlepalooza event. This is an 8.5-mile race that starts in Riverside Park in Auburn Hills and finishes near the Rivercrest Banquet Center in Rochester Hills. So as part of this event, both mayors, Mayor McDaniel and Mayor Barnett from Rochester Hills, compete every year in a little friendly competition for bragging rights, really, but really for the Mayor's Cup, which we have here this evening. So the weather was perfect, the water was great, and I'm happy to report that, again, Team Auburn Hills won the Mayor's Cup this year because of Mayor McDaniel and Jim Stevens doing so well with their paddles. They won it again, 3rd straight year. So how about a nice round of applause for our Mayor and Jim. And I'm going to bring up here. But I'm not done yet. There's more. All right. So for the first time, and I think that this team has been practicing a little bit and doing some training, because not only did they win the Mayor's Cup, they finished in the top 3 of the canoe race. So they placed 3rd with a time of 1 hour, 44 minutes, and 6 seconds. This was just 2 minutes behind the 2nd place team. So we'd like to present this 3rd place trophy also for the canoe race to Team Auburn Hills.
And Mr. Marzoff, if you would present that one to Mr. Stevens there. I would like to personally thank Mr. Stevens because I was the smart one, right, that selected a civil engineer who could calculate the flow rate and all the stormwater that was going into the so. But no, it was a great fun time, and I know there was a lot of participants out there. And as Mr. Marzoff said, it was a great day. So I know that Mr. Knight also sent us off on that lovely Saturday morning.
Absolutely.
Yes, Mr. Knight gave him 2 of only 4 existing pins as good luck pieces, and they won the trophy and lost the pins.
All right, so in conclusion, congratulations to Team Auburn Hills and Team Rochester Hills as well, because they're very good sports, of course. And to everyone who competed and enjoyed this event, we're really looking forward to next year's event. It's getting bigger and better every year, so thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Director Marzoff. Thank you, Jim Stevens. Okay, we'll move on to public comment. Ladies and gentlemen, this portion of the agenda is reserved for anyone in the audience wishing to speak on an item that is not on this evening's agenda. We do ask that when you come through council chamber doors, that you complete a public comment form. This just helps facilitate the meeting and to ensure that we have accurate information for public record. We do limit public comment to 3 minutes per speaker as a reminder, And at this time, if I could call Mr. John Lang to the podium. Good evening, sir.
Mr. Mayor, Council, welcome. Thank you for having me.
Just for the, yeah,
my-
go ahead.
My name is John Lang. I'm a director on the Bloomfield Orchard Civic Association Board. We've been recently contacted by Eric King, manager of municipal properties for the city of Auburn Hills. He stated that Auburn Hills is looking to reduce in-house mowing and the city will cease mowing operations on the 4 islands in our neighborhood. The city has been mowing these cul-de-sacs from the March of 2009 to the end of, we've been notified the end will be June 30th, 2017. I do understand that these mowing operations on the island do impact the city budget. I can assure you that the financial impact would be a real hardship on the association side. For decades, Boca negotiated and contracted our own rubbish carrier and commingled association dues together. It worked. If you paid your dues, your garbage was picked up. Since the city has gone to a single wide carrier, Boca has lost the ability to enforce dues payment. Today, less than 35% of the homeowners are current on their dues. We have a neighborhood park that the association does maintain mowing, and ensuring it costs us thousands. What I'm formally requesting the city council today is could the city do an in-house review and with input from the city attorney to discover who has ownership of the islands. The neighborhood cannot afford the mowing operations on these islands. If we do not own them, we don't feel that we should have to maintain them. I would ask that the findings be forwarded to Mr. King. He has my contact information, and that's why I'm here today, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lang. If you could just, do you have anything that you'd like to leave as relates to this, or is that just for your own
This
notes?
is just something
Okay.
I wrote up today. Mr. King's got my
Okay.
contact information. If we could just find ownership, do a in-house search, find out who owns them. We don't feel we can afford to maintain them, so that's what I'm asking today.
Okay, great. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all the public comment forms that I have at this time. However, if you did not get an opportunity to complete one and you still wish to speak, would you please come forward? Seeing no one, we will go ahead and close the public comment portion of the meeting at 7:06. Council will move on to the consent agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, all items are listed to be considered routine by the city council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of any of these items unless a council member so requests, in which event that item will be removed from the consent agenda and then considered in its normal sequence. Council, the items for our consideration this evening are the receiving of our executive session minutes that occurred on February 13th, March 27th, April 10th, April 24th, and May 8th of this year, as well as the receiving of our boards and commission minutes for the Downtown Development Authority meeting on May 15th, the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority on May 16th, as well as the purchase of 19 Cradle Point wireless modems for our police patrol vehicles. Council, the consent agenda is before us for a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Verbecky?
if nobody wants to pull any of the items, I would make a motion to approve items 7A1, 7A2, 7A3, 7A4, 7A5, 7B1, 7B2, and 7C.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Verbecky. Do we have support?
Second.
Supported by Ms. Mitchell. Is there any further discussion or comment? We are ready to vote.
Ms. Verbecky,
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Burmeister,
Yes.
Ms. Hammond,
Yes.
Mr. Kittle,
Yes.
Mr. Knight,
Yes.
Mayor McDaniel.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. There is no old business, so we'll move on to item 9. It's new business. 9A is a request for a motion for the Plant Moran presentation of the audit and also the acceptance of the audit. At this time, can I call Plant Moran representatives Michelle Waterworth and Justin Cobo to the podium?
Good evening.
Good evening.
As the mayor mentioned, my name is Michelle Waterworth, and I have part of my team here with me this evening. I have Justin Cobo and Zach Aguilo, who are here, and we're very thankful that you asked us to come and present the results of our audit for the year ended 12/31/2016. Just want to make sure that you have all the information that we'll be talking about this evening. So first, there is a thicker package, which would be the audited financial statements. And then you also have a letter package, which is the smaller package. And then also you should have a copy of the graph package, which is where we're actually going to spend most of our time this evening. We aren't going to go through all of the 90 or so pages of the financial statements this evening, but what the intent of the graph package is to highlight some of the key items within the financial statements. But we're certainly happy to answer any questions that you have based on your review of the financial statements. The one thing and the most important thing relative to the audited financial statements would be Plant Moran's opinion on those financial statements. So I do want to let you know that we did express what we call an unmodified opinion. It's the highest level of assurance you can get on a set of audited financial statements. So it's the opinion that the city strives for and the opinion that, again, that you would like and that you did receive on those financial statements. It basically just means that our audit, the numbers presented in the financial statements, we feel are materially accurate in all respects. All right, so with that, we're gonna move right into covering the graph package. And again, the intent of the graph package is to highlight the financial statements, but if you have specific questions on any of the financial statement pages, or, as we go along and we're covering the graphs, please feel free to interrupt us.
Thank you very much. I'd like to start off by thanking Michelle and her team. They do a great job. We're out here for about a month, and we ask several questions, and they're always enthusiastic and very willing to assist us. So we thank Michelle and the rest of her team. They do a great job for us. So, like Michelle said, we're going to give you a snapshot of the results for the year ended December 31st, 2016. Starting off, we're going to look at the general fund revenue. Just to give you a little bit of the lay of the land here, on the left we have 2015, and on the right we have 2016, just for some comparisons. In the current year, the total revenue did increase for the general fund by $3.1 million. If you look at the components of the general fund revenue, you'll note that the city's largest revenue source, property taxes, did increase modestly by about $685,000. The next item is state sources. That did increase by $1.5 million, but within there's a new component this year. It's $2 million that was received by the city from the Local Community Stabilization Authority. And this authority is a state-ran authority, which is really set up to reimburse the city for lost personal property taxes. And in the current year, the authority distributed 265% of what we originally had anticipated. So this is not an item that we can continue to budget going forward, but nonetheless, it did add to the city's fund balance in 2016. Looking at the other components, you'll note that the licenses and permits did increase by about $400,000. That's just as a result of the continued development within the city. And then everything else, while there was a slight uptick in charges for services, I looked through the components there. There was not one significant driver. That's just made up of police overtime reimbursements and plan renewal fees, or plan renew fees. The next graph, this also looks at the general fund revenue, but just in a little bit different way. This is really just to highlight where our revenue sources are coming from. In 2016, would look very similar to 2015. But really what we wanted to show here is that property taxes and state sources, two of the significant revenue sources for which the city has no ability to really impact, that makes up 71% of the general fund revenue. Last year it was 70%. So going forward, in the past and going forward, I know that the city council has done a great job of anticipating fluctuations in revenue swings, and we're going to demonstrate that in the upcoming slides.
Excuse me, question, please.
Yes.
On the previous slide, when I look at the comparison between 2015 and 2016, it looks like I'm seeing increases in most areas except for interest and other, which I can understand. And then there's also has been a decrease in administrative and inter-fund charges. And I'd like to understand that a little bit better.
Well, the city does maintain a schedule to support how they're going to charge out the administrative and inter-fund charges. And that is for which, like, the general fund would charge your benefiting funds, your major and local streets, and other different benefiting units for services that are provided that there's not a certain individual that's directly expensed to those other benefiting funds. And so they maintain a schedule based on certain cost drivers that results in some fluctuations. And so in the current year, the results supported a change in the inter-fund charges. I don't think there was one significant driver, but if you'd like, we can look into that a little bit further.
The last two items are both transfers from someone else in the city, someplace else. There's charge for services, that's within the city. That's not revenue, that's transfer of funds.
The charges for services is actually charges to outside.
The last
The
item.
very last item is actually charges to outside
Oh,
parties.
okay, the only one that's within is the second last, thank you. I was wondering whether that last one was, okay.
So I'm sorry, maybe I'm not thinking about it, but did we make a change or reduction to inter-fund charges? I guess I wasn't expecting that. Do we remember? Did we?
Ms. Mitchell, a big part of the reduction in administrative and interfund is just a recategorization during the year of the library interfund charges. So in the past, they have been under admin and interfund. This year, they are categorized as charges for services. So I think that's the reduction that you're seeing.
Okay.
So net, when you look at both of them combined, there really wasn't a substantial reduction in that particular line item.
Okay, that's understandable. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Graph 3, this focuses on property taxes and when they actually become revenue to the city. So 2016, which is the year that we're presenting the results, that is on the second column from the far left, so 12/31/2016. These property taxes were assessed 2 years ago, December 31st, 2014, and were levied on 12/1/2015. So really there's a 2-year lag, and by the time they assess the properties and when it really generates revenue to the city. And so in 2016, as we noted on the first slide, there was a slight uptick of about 3% in property tax revenues. Going forward in 2017, we expect that there's going to be a slight downturn or a decrease in your property tax revenue as a result of reductions in your taxable value. And then the assessor provided information to support that. In 2018, we're going to be pretty consistent with where we are today in 2016 at about $1.5 billion in taxable value.
Decrease from personal property tax?
Personal property would be the biggest driver.
Does the effect of the personal property tax then go away? Because I noticed the following year, we anticipate almost 3%. And is that considering what's already lost and gone, but it's still gonna go up?
I can't speak exactly to what's causing the 3-year swing there, but I anticipate, yeah, some of it's going to be, I know that the personal property is not gonna come back on. I'm guessing that's just anticipated increases in just from growth in your recent development. That's just adding to that taxable value line. The next item, this looks at general fund expenditures. As you'll note, in the current year, there was a decrease of about $2.8 million in the general fund expenditures. Not really going to go over this in too much detail. A lot of the story is told in that very first line, it's in the transfers out. If you remember, in 2015, the city made a significant investment in their infrastructure. We did transfer $4.4 million to the Major and Local Streets Fund in 2015. And then in 2016, we reduced that down to just about $1 million. And so that's really our change in our fund balance. Looking at the other components, there really hasn't been much shift in our cost structure, which just supports that the city has done a great job of containing costs and really spending their revenues appropriately. This graph, this looks at the general fund balance, and this is specifically unrestricted fund balance, which does not include fund balance categories such as non-spendable and restricted fund balances. So this is really fund balance that is available to the general fund. Now, $23.7 million, it suggests that the city is in sound financial condition, which it truly is. The city council has prepared a 5-year budget which supports that over the next 5 years, in order to balance the budget, we're going to have to use some of that fund balance. And in 2017, we have actually budgeted to use $6.1 million, for which the city has committed that fund balance. So over the next several years, we anticipate that this number will come down. I think this is going to be an ongoing item for which we have to continue to look at, but at this point, the city has a plan for this money, and that's the main goal here. Shifting gears from the general fund to the water and sewer fund, we look at a 5-year or 3-year trend of the water and sewer fund, and then we have a projection for 2017. As you'll note, in 2014 and 2015, operating revenue and operating expenses, which does include depreciation, is very consistent. It was pretty much operating at a net cash flow break even. In 2016, you'll note that our operating revenues did increase. There's really 2 components here. One, the city did increase their water and sewer rates, but also you can see the benefit of being a member of the NACWA, so North Oakland County Water Authority. And as a result, we have been able to contain some of our costs there. So this is showing the benefit. In 2017, we expect that those are going to be a little bit closer at more of a break-even cash flow perspective. And finally, we look at the golf course fund. We show three different lines here: operating revenue in orange, the blue is the operating expenses, and then it's a greenish. That is cash flow expenses. You'll note that in the past, the blue line and the orange line there was definitely a gap there. And that was because of depreciation expense, for which we added back. In the current year, there was a change in your net pension liability, for which is calculated at a citywide level, and then we actually allocate it to the benefiting funds. And that in the current year, there was a decrease in that liability that was associated with the golf course fund, resulting in the depreciation and the net pension liability change, netting out to pretty much a 0-0 there. So there was no impact. So overall, it does still support that from an operating standpoint. It is pretty much a break even from a cash flow perspective. That's all we had from the financial statements. If you guys have any questions, we'd be more than willing to answer any.
Right, council? Any questions? Mr. Kittle?
Thank you for the presentation. What was the amount that the personal property tax represented in the revenue
In the
for
state
16? It was
sources?
revenue received in 2017. We had to pull it ahead or pull it back into 16.
In the general fund, it was about $2 million
$2 million.
that was recorded as revenue in this calendar year, 2016.
And that's in the property tax
No,
bucket
that is actually presented within the
State
state
sources.
sources.
in the blue. Okay. So about 2 million. Okay. And then on the golf course, is the revenue shown at 1.386? Is that just, does that include food and beverage and golf? And
Everything, yeah, that's all operating. So the only thing that really doesn't include are a couple of small non-operating components, and then the transfer in from the general fund.
Okay. And then the details in the audit as far as,
Correct, what those components comprise of, yes.
thanks.
How much of the expense is depreciation?
That-
Just a wild guess.
Like
In the golf course
200,000.
fund? In the golf course fund?
Yes, in the golf course fund.
That is, sorry, it's $379,000.
Okay, because we believed in the past that our cash income exceeded our cash expenses, and you're confirming that. Say, but when you throw in the depreciation, it doesn't tell us actually our net cash. I realize you gotta put away money to replace the building and all that, but I'm concerned about the cash, and the point is, we took in more cash than we spent, than we put out.
Actually, on a cash flow basis, you were pretty much break even in the golf course fund this year.
I've been led to believe for years that it was a couple $100,000. And this keeps telling me, no, it isn't. And so fine, that's why I asked about that, because I understood that that would produce a little cash up to a couple $100,000 operating as a business entity.
Right, and this year it was about $43,000 that the revenues exceeded on a cash flow basis.
I'm strictly at cash flow because
And that wouldn't include the transfer from the general fund, or there are certain non-operating, like you have some property tax revenue that goes into the golf course, it wouldn't include those. But purely if you're looking at operating revenues and operating expenses, it was about.
that's why I asked that,
43,000.
Bob, because we're always been wondering, is it actually paying its way? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Your Honor.
Ms. Mitchell?
Okay, first of all, thank you again for a very comprehensive report. I really appreciate that. Value the summary format that you have on page 1 that we went through, as well as the one on page 5. Found those very helpful as we went through the information this evening. So thank you for that, and request to maintain that moving forward, if we could keep that format. One other point that I would like to discuss, didn't notice it in this documentation or the information that we had online, but I think we last had some conversation about it during the last week of January, and it was in reference to a recommendation that Plant Moran had made regarding an employee identification number for the library. Could you go over that recommendation one more time and help us understand again the rationale behind that recommendation?
Right, absolutely. And it actually stems not necessarily from a recommendation from Plant, because what we were looking at was the tax side of things. But I believe in an attorney opinion that Mr. Beckerleg had wrote relative to, I think it was, Tom, refresh my memory. Was it, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Lang, thank you. Relative to the employees of the library and whether or not they're employees of the city or employees of the library. And Mr. Lang's opinion, from a legal perspective, was the employees of the library are literally employees of that separate entity, not employees of the city. So when we took a look at that and we looked at it in reference to IRS regulations, tax regulations, we recommended that the library then establish their own EIN number in order to ensure that from an IRS standpoint, you're completely in compliance based on that legal opinion.
Thank you. Now, I know in years past you have also conducted the audits for the library. Will you be doing that again for the 2016 calendar year?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, great. I would respectfully request that that recommendation and that rationale be communicated explicitly to that Board of Trustees as well, because I want to make sure that the understanding is there.
Right, and I've actually had some conversation with the chair, and we are going to talk about it on the 22nd when we go to present to them.
The 22nd of this month?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Council, any further questions? Mr. Kittle? Or actually, let's go to Ms. Verbecki first, and then I'll let you get another opportunity.
Thank you. On the letter that you sent us Sunday, June 5th, there was a question about one of the controls being in place. Can you?
Yeah,
identify
why
that?
don't I cover the letter, and then we'll see if you have
Okay.
any further questions. Thank you for that lead-in. So on the letter package, there's 3 different sections to this letter. The first section would be our recommendations surrounding internal controls, and we have really 3 items that we've included in that letter. The first item is similar to other items that we've reported to City Council in the past, and that is the journal entries that we posted as a result of the audit. When auditors, under audit standards, whenever we post journal entries, we do need to let you know about those. But I'm pleased to report that they are not recurring type journal entries. They are those journal entries that occur once a year when you're closing out, your funds, and you're doing some really special, unique things with your capital assets, with your prepaid assets, with your restricted assets. And so those would be the nature. They're not reoccurring type things where on a month-to-month basis, the city absolutely is getting the accounting right. They're those unique, special, one-time items that we posted adjustments to as a result of the audit. The second item that we have here relates to controls over investments. And if you think about controls, there's 2 types of controls. There's preventative controls, which prevent things from happening, and there's detective controls, which detect something in hindsight. The city has great detective controls. So, for example, bank reconciliations, those would be detective controls. If anything were to happen, the bank reconciliation process would detect that an error occurred or something happened. But when we talk about cash and investments, we really like to ensure that not only are those detective controls in place, but also preventative controls, because we want to prevent an error from happening. And it's those preventative controls that we're talking about in the second bullet that we are recommending that the city strengthen to ensure that any errors are prevented rather than just detected. And then the very last item is an item that, quite frankly, already has been rectified, but again, we bring it to your attention. So during the year, enterprise administrative access, which is kind of like flow-blown access to the financial software system, was granted for a period of time, really on an unintentional basis. It was supposed to be granted and then removed very quickly. And in essence, it was granted and never removed. When we brought this to the attention of the city, it was rectified. That administrative access on an enterprise basis was removed, so it's no longer an issue. But again, we had a concern about that and so brought that to your attention. Then section 2 of our letter, there's really only a couple things that I wanted to point out in section 2. And they are at the top of page 4. So I think Justin mentioned the first one, and that was pension and what happened with your pension this year. So right now, there are some very significant assumptions that the actuary uses to calculate the pension liability. And very sensitive to changes in assumptions that liability would be. What happened this year is your assumption relative to what's called your long-term rate of return, so the rate of return that you expect on your pension plan investments, went up by about 60 basis points, which doesn't sound like a huge change, but the liability is extremely sensitive to just minor changes in this assumption. And when that assumed rate of return goes up, your liability actually goes down. And so this year, there was a pretty big swing in your liability such that it went down by the tune of about $9 million simply because of that change in assumption. So I did want to bring that to your attention because if you look at your funding status, at least what's disclosed in the financial statements, it looks like the plan's funding level went significantly up this year. Well, it did, but it's because of those changing assumptions. All right, and then
If it went up, then the change of assumptions were more, I would expect they were gonna be more conservative, so it would go down. Is it the rate of the value of the things in the pension fund that went up significantly to do that?
it was your expectation regarding the interest that you were going to earn. So if you expect to earn more interest, that when the actuary calculates the present value of the liability, so in essence, the present value of the benefits that you expect to pay out of the plan, that liability goes down because you will have more interest coming into the plan.
We actually projected we were higher in
By
the
about-
pension fund? Pension fund guys?
By about 60 basis points. It was, again, like I said, it was a pretty small change. If you think about it, it went from 6.05% to 6.6%. So a very small change, but again, that liability is highly sensitive to that type of change. Okay. And then just the last section, I just wanted to point out just a couple things. I won't cover everything in there, but in section 3, we've got a number of informational type items. So we talked about the pension, which is on page 6, but I did want to let you know on page 7 that there are some new standards that are going to impact the healthcare liabilities. So a couple of years ago, you brought that net pension liability onto your financial statements, which was a significant change. And in the future, the city will also be bringing on a net OPEB liability as well. And it will take it's about estimates right now, about $16 million of additional liability that's not reflected in the financial statements that will be when the new accounting standards are adopted. So what we did in the middle of that letter is just modeled for you what your net position would look like both today, before these new OPEB or healthcare standards are implemented, and then what the impact of implementing this new accounting standard would have on your financial statements. On page 8, just want to also just highlight PA 530 of 2016, which requires the city to do some additional reporting on pension and on OPEB. And one of the things that will be new to the city, because the city's already been producing a summary annual report that will continue to be required. But one of the things that the state is now requiring is any local unit whose OPEB plan is less than 60% funded will have to file with the state essentially what their plan is to reduce or increase that funded status, reduce the liability. So I did want to bring that to your attention as well. So that's it on the letter. Are there any other questions that we can answer for you this evening?
Anything additional, Ms. Rebecca, in the letter?
I guess specifically on page 2, on the second concern that was brought with the internal controls when you're talking about that. So is an action put in place then?
My understanding is yes, an action
Okay.
is forthcoming.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Knight?
I'm gonna ask a question, I ask it every year. You have a statement at the end of the year, it says, here's all the assets. That's what's it totaled up. You have checked to see that money is there.
We confirm all of your bank accounts with each individual bank. So we get a statement from the bank saying, here's what we show in our records, and we then compare it to
Okay,
yours.
so that is reconciled.
Absolutely.
Now, limited number of samplings, they paid the bill that
Correct.
is that,
No, we found no issues, again, other than those couple that we reported to you on page 2.
thank you very much.
The money
No,
is
so
there.
it's terribly important.
Absolutely, I understand. You're welcome.
Mr. Kittle?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple other questions. On the revenue that, we received, the 2.1 million.
From the LCSA?
So that was money we received in 17, but we had to book it in 16 again.
Correct. The accounting standards would have required you to book it back.
So will we see the equivalent, category of state reimbursement come in this year in 17?
In 17, you will see revenue. I can't tell you what that amount is. So as Justin mentioned, the distribution this year from the LCSA was 265%. What they're saying is normally you get 100%, so you got some extra distributions. I can't tell you if you'll get 265% next year or just 100%, but I can tell you, you will get something.
But from a cycle standpoint, will it be the same where it comes in 18 and we have
Correct.
to reverse?
And you'll have to record it back, absolutely. Yep, so there won't be a blip in that regard.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Knight?
I want to compliment both of you. I'm the hard of hearing person. You both speak clearly and slowly enough so that I understood what you said, and I appreciate that very much. It was a good presentation from my standpoint.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much for speaking slow.
Thank you, Mr. Knight.
Ms. Hammond?
Just one quick one. I just want you all to know that how hard Michelle works, because we both had loved ones having surgery at the same time, and we're in the waiting room, and she was actually working on our audit while she was waiting on results of her loved one that was being operated on.
Wow. Dedication for sure. Council, any further questions for Plant Moran? No? Okay, if not, be open for a motion for the acceptance of the audit.
Your Honor,
Ms. Mitchell?
move to accept and approve the city's financial report with supplemental information of the year ending December 31st, 2016, and the related communication letter as presented by the city's independent auditors, Plant Moran.
Moved by Ms. Mitchell. Do we have support?
Support.
Support by Ms. Hammond. Any further discussion? We're ready to vote.
Ms. Mitchell?
Yes.
Ms. Hammond? Mr. Burmeister?
Yes.
Mr. Kittle?
Yes.
Mr. Knight?
Yes.
Ms. Rebecki?
Yes.
Mayor McDaniel?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
to all three of you for coming this evening. Greatly appreciated. Okay, moving on, under new business, we have 9B. It's a request for motion in the first reading for changes to our fire code ordinance. Chief Manning?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to ask Inspector Boyce to come forward. He is our resident expert on the fire code, and he'll be explaining the requested changes in the...
Excellent, thank you. Good evening, Inspector Boyce.
Thank you. We ask this change every so often when the Michigan Building Code changes. We ask that we update our fire code so that it mimics the changes in the Michigan Building Code, so that the things that the community development is asking for is the same thing that we're asking for. So we've asked to adopt the International Fire Code 2015, and we just made some slight changes to it. So it will be the Auburn Hills version of it.
Excellent. Council, any questions for the inspector? Mr. Knight?
Yes, I read the changes you made, and you would think. The very last one bothered me just a little. At least it's the one about locating a fire hydrant off-site, not on the road, but off-site. I remember a few years ago, we had a petitioner came in, and he was building a building, and they had to put a fire plug back on the property, and we told them where it had to be. Their architects didn't have any. And the way I read that is it says that you will tell people where they have to put the plug. Am I reading that right? I think it's a little, it appeared to imply that. And is that what the implication is? Or can they negotiate and say, well, we'd like it here, and you could say, well, it's not good there because of this?
Well, Councilman Knight, typically what we do is we have a pre-construction meeting, and it's during the site plan meetings we have before they issue the official site plan. And they kind of give us an idea where they want to put them, and then we kind of talk to them about it, where we think it works. Sometimes there's issues like location, but.
I figured it was that, but I wanted to pay because it kind of said,
Any further questions? Mr. Burmeister?
Yes, Inspector Boyce, during our previous conversation before the council meeting, I had a question regarding recreational fire, the difference between a recreational fire and a bonfire. For those that are watching, could you please explain that, the difference and what
Absolutely.
each one is?
In the fire code, they consider a bonfire a religious fire. So we've always been calling bonfires recreational fires. So to eliminate any confusion, when you apply for a bonfire permit, that could be for recreational purposes and or religious purposes. So we wanted to put it all in under one title just to avoid any confusion.
Go ahead.
And correct me if I'm wrong, you don't need a bonfire permit if you're burning in a chimney or a covered pit, or one of the ones you buy at Home Depot. Is that correct?
That's correct. If you have a chimney, you don't require a bonfire permit, as long as you're using it in a safe manner.
I'm sorry.
So-
Just on it, I'm not quite sure what you said. In the old days, you called up said, I'm gonna have bonfire, and fire department say, fine. And you didn't have to call back for a recreation fire the rest of the year. Is that still the way?
That's correct. It's still, once you get a bonfire permit for the year, it's good for the entire
You
year.
notify, I've got a place, I'm gonna have a fire, a recreational fire, and, okay.
Just to clarify, I hear that correctly. So if you have a chimney or a covered pit or something, you don't need a permit?
That's right, as long as you're using it within the parameters of the safety precautions that come with the product.
Okay. So, I mean, it's just a little confusing because that's still considered a recreational fire, correct?
That's correct, but when you have a chimney, there's limits to the size of the fire can be.
Okay.
What we're concerned about when there's bonfires is the size, the proximity to other places. When it's in a chimney, it's very self-contained. So we try to make it as easy as possible for people to enjoy recreational fires.
Okay, should there be any more, I guess, specification on that for where it says permit required? Because as it reads now, it says bonfires and recreational fires. And so I'm just thinking that, as a resident, right, that wants to follow the ordinance, I guess you could call and then be corrected. But I would just think that's a recreational fire. Maybe it's not a bonfire pit, but.
We thought by adding language like that would add to confusion.
Okay,
So the people that have the chimneys typically call us and we let them know the rules about it. And
okay. As long as some consideration was given, that's great. Okay, got it. Mr. Burmeister's got a chimney. Any further questions, comments? Mr. Beck, do you have anything? Okay, all right. With that, be open for a motion for the first reading.
Mr. Mayor?
Ms. Verbecki.
Move to introduce with intention to adopt Auburn Hills Ordinance 17-895, amending Chapter 38, Article 1, Section F-104.11.7, F-304.3.5, F-307.2, F-507.5.1, and delete sections F-307.4 and 307.4.1 of the City of Auburn Hills Code of Ordinance Fire Prevention and Protection, and set a public hearing, second reading, and final adoption on June 26, 2017.
All right, moved by Ms. Verbecki. Do we have support?
Support.
Supported by Mr. Burmeister. Any further discussion or comment? We're ready to vote.
Ms. Verbecki?
Yes.
Mr. Burmeister?
Yes.
Ms. Hammond?
Yes.
Mr. Kittle?
Yes.
Mr. Knight?
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mayor McDaniel?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you to our inspector there. 9C, it's a request for motion for the Squirrel Road Emergency Sewer Repair. Deputy Director Herzig, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. This consideration is for a sanitary sewer repair on Squirrel Road in front of the Five Points development. Staff discovered the belly in the sewer system in 2016, and originally we paired it with a bid for a Birchfield sewer improvement in that same year. We set it as a separate division, and unfortunately that project was suspended to align with future road repairs and achieve a better cost overall for the project. The repair still needs to be made, however, and the two low bidders included in the tab, Mondamo and VIL, were contacted by city staff and chose not to perform the work in lieu of the larger project not being awarded. However, last week, city staff was performing a pre-construction meeting with the underground utility contractor for the 5 Points project, Superior Excavating. They were the third low bid on that project. We were able to negotiate a not to exceed price of $39,000 to do that repair with aid from the city staff and our equipment. So our recommendation is to move forward and award the repair to Superior Excavating.
Thank you, Deputy Director Herzig. Council, any questions for staff? If not,
I have one.
oh, sure, Mr. Kittle.
When you say that the sewer had a belly in it when you were doing your camera work, you know, I kind of looked down and I think I know what that means, but is that a technical term? Is it?
A technical term for a dip in the sewer line.
So, and that's from the top section of the pipe? I mean, it's where it's actually bowing in or something?
This particular one is from structure to structure, from manhole to manhole. There's a belly or a dip in the pipe that restricts the flow.
Oh, did everyone else know that? No, I didn't. No, okay. All right, I didn't understand the failure, so I wanted to find out. Thank you.
All right. Council, any further questions? If not, be open for a motion.
Your Honor,
Ms. Mitchell.
move to approve award of the Squirrel Road sanitary sewer repair to Superior Excavating for the not-to-exceed amount of $39,000 to be paid from sewer account number 592-535-971, period 000.
All right, moved by Ms. Mitchell. Do we have support?
Support?
Supported by Ms. Verbecki. Any further discussion? We're ready to vote.
Ms. Mitchell,
Yes.
Ms. Verbecki,
Yes.
Mr. Burmeister,
Yes.
Ms. Hammond,
Yes.
Mr. Kittle,
Yes.
Mr. Knight,
Yes.
Mayor McDaniel.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Item number 10, comments and motions from council. Go ahead and start down with Ms. Hammond.
I actually have nothing this evening, thank you.
All right, Mr. Kittle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just two. One is on my way to and from the golf course over the weekend. I noticed that the Taylor Road striping in the new section that we put in front of Continental all the way, or excuse me, TI Automotive all the way to Lapeer is peeling. I mean, it's just like off. And I think that was that fancy stuff where we actually did the little milling and put the higher grade striping in so that it would last forever. And so you guys might want to take a look at that, but it's peeling off really bad. And then I was just wondering if there was any information to be gleaned from the directed patrol unit work that we've been doing up at Tinkin and Squirrel.
Yes, there is. I didn't know if Mr. Tanchi perhaps shared some of the conclusions that we found. An examination of the traffic volume data from the SCATS signals and the observation by the officers that I think you saw out there one day, we discovered that there was indeed a traffic bubble just for about 1 hour in the late afternoon. What we also learned is that the traffic on Tinkin that's westbound has the ability to cause the light on its signal on Squirrel to turn red. When a vehicle presents westbound on Tinkin, the signal changes on Squirrel. So when the volume goes up on Squirrel and there's a vehicle on Tinkin, the light changes and it's not giving enough time for the turning traffic to clear out. So we have asked Road Commission to make a change to that. They made it at 5:49 on Thursday evening. So we're going to watch that for about a week and see if that resolves the issue. Or well, hopefully it doesn't create another unexpected outcome. But that's the most cost-efficient way to do it, and we'll keep trying to do that for a little while and see if we can reach an optimal signal timing that's effective for traffic conditions at all times on that intersection. If that doesn't work, then we'll have to reconsider something else, but we wanted to find the most cost-efficient way we could.
Sure, safety first, though, of course. Is that, I noticed we were taking some traffic, we had ribbons out, we were taking some counts, or was that?
Those were TIA's hoses, and they are taking counts as part of the North Squirrel Road study that they're doing for the city.
Okay. Finally, did the officers that were doing the patrol, I mean, has red light running become a little bit of the norm up there? Is it more aggressive, or?
Well, they didn't speak to that exactly, but they said there is more likelihood when the signal changes on Squirrel and not enough cars were getting through the intersection, that is more of an issue. But we wanted to see if we could resolve it with the signal timing change, and then if we need to, we'll put some enforcement out there as well.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to, further monitoring of it.
Okay. I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Burmeister.
With the schools being out of session or in session, does that have any impact on the traffic flows on Tinkin? I know it's late in the evening and I don't know what, their school's probably not in session, but other school activities are, such as Oakland Christian, the Apostolic Church.
We were able to determine that the Apostolic Church, we didn't believe had much impact on that particular issue at that time of day. We didn't really find that there was any other big traffic bubble as there was at that one particular hour of the day. That was the biggest bubble that we saw. So I can't speak to that specifically, but we didn't find anything other than that one aberration, and that's the one we're trying to resolve right now. So we'll see what happens now that the schools are out. We may have to look again in the spring.
And go ahead, Mr. Burmeister, and your comments.
Who's going to be checking into the property ownership of the Bloomfield Orchard Islands that Mr. Lang was speaking of?
I think we have some history on that, and I'll check with DPW. My recollection, as I heard it, was that those were islands that were under their control in the past, and when there was a high number of foreclosures in their neighborhood some years ago when the market hit the skids, as I understand it, we were asked if we could help them out by taking them over while they stabilized their revenue stream from homeowners association dues. So at this point, I think the decision was, it's now 9 years later, it's time we give back what we helped you out with for the last 9 years. Now, if we find out something to the contrary, that they are ours in the first place, that's another story. So I'll check with DPW and take a look at if there's any way to determine exact ownership. I'm not sure exactly how we go about doing that. So, yeah.
That's all I have.
Okay. Mr. Knight?
Great. The mayor presided over a very successful fishing derby on Saturday. We set a record of 114 youth. Their old record was 111. So it's continued. Bass Pro Shops has been a most gracious supporter. They brought probably 40 or 50 fishing rods, and all the young people went home with some kind of a prize. I saw several fish caught. The fish looked real well. One young man said he caught 5. I don't know what he did, but I saw a young lady catch 2 of the 3 that she had. There's a couple secret holes there, but it was extremely well attended with parents and so on, and Bass Pro Shops really did a good job, along with our recreation department and so on. It was a very successful event. Second is an invitation. Before we meet again, we will festival of a car. The noon, any of you at noon to come down and enjoy the food as my guest. So that's a public invitation. And come and see the cars. There will be a great thing. The third item is, I don't hear anything about National Night Out. No, I don't, I just haven't seen anything. Are we having those? It was always on the election day in August, the primary election day. And so, are we having it this year in the 3 locations? I was just curious. I hadn't heard anything.
I'll let the police chief add some information in here, but yes, they're being planned for more neighborhood areas rather than the one larger celebration. So you probably hear less about it because we're not advertising them so citywide, more neighborhood wide.
I was hoping it was going to continue. Thank you. I'm done.
Okay. Mr. Becky. I'm sorry, Chief, did you want to add something? Go ahead,
Not
sorry.
much more to add. We are planning for the 3 locations. I can't name them for you right this moment, but we've certainly been talking to our partners, such as Target, and you'll see more in the not too distant future. But it is at a different level than we have done it in the past.
Okay, thank you for that. Ms. Rebecca.
Nothing this evening, thank you.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell.
I only have one thing, and that is to remind people that we are coming up on Summerfest later this month, so June 23rd and 24th. Big celebration downtown, and hope to see lots of residents there.
Thank you. And most of mine were covered, so I would just, one reminder, goals and objectives is a week from this evening for City Council and the staff. And then, so.
It's at the University Center in downtown.
And then some may have heard, but on behalf of the City Council, I would like to extend our thoughts and prayers with the Gruznik family. Our founding and our first mayor, Bob Gruznik, passed away on May 31st of this year. And so, again, I wanted to send our sincere condolences to the family. Obviously, he has a lot of deep roots with the city of Auburn Hills, as well as the former Pontiac Township. So, again, all the best to the family in this time of need. With
Can I
that,
hitchhike just-
absolutely.
Our fire department did a marvelous job of representing the city. And I talked to Vivian, and she was just thrilled on how things were handled by the fire department, the sensitivity and I think, joy in being able to do it. And I want to pass on the comment. She personally said she appreciated how much, and she even liked Mr. Tangi and his presentation. But the city did a great job.
Yeah, it was believable up until that point. No, I'm just kidding. So I did, and that was going to be part of mine as well, is, I did want to thank Mr. Tangi because I know that he, in essence, facilitated and made sure that we had good representation for the city for that, as well as working with our fire department there. So thank you, Mr. Tangi, for all of the work that you did to extend our best wishes to the family there during that unfortunate time in their life. So with that, I would like to move on to the city attorney's report. City manager's report.
I have nothing to report tonight.
Okay. Well, then we'll go into executive session. If I can get a motion from council, we'll need to discuss labor negotiations regarding a fire department MOU, as well as property acquisition. Council?
So moved.
All right, moved by Ms. Mitchell, supported by Ms. Hammond. Ready to vote.
Ms. Mitchell?
Yes.
Ms. Hammond?
Yes.
Mr. Burmeister?
Yes.
Mr. Kittle?
Yes.
Mr. Knight?
Yes.
Ms. Rebecki?
Yes.
Mayor McDaniel?
Yes,
Motion carries.
thank you. Okay, we'll reconvene at 8:59. I told you we'd be back here before 9. With that, we have a motion by Mr. Burmeister.
Yes, sir. After quite some time, I would like to move to authorize the city manager to execute the memorandum of understanding for fire department suppression personnel to begin operating under a 24-hour shift schedule in accordance with the terms and conditions of the memorandum of understanding, and to begin said operational method to align with the start of the payroll period on or before October 2017.
Support.
All right, moved by Mr. Burmeister, supported by Ms. Verbecki. We're ready to vote. Mr. Burmeister?
Yes.
Ms. Verbecki?
Yes.
Mr. Kittle?
Yes.
Ms. Hammond?
Yes.
Mr. Knight?
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell?
Yes.
McDaniel votes yes. Motion passes 7-0. With that, we have another motion. Who's going for this one?
Sure, Your Honor.
Ms. Mitchell?
Move to authorize the city manager to purchase the property commonly known as 2041 Auburn Road, property identification number 14-26-351-001, in the amount of $34,492.76, and to execute all documents on behalf of the city related to the purchase, up to and including those necessary to close the sale and obtain title insurance.
Okay, moved by Ms. Mitchell. Do we have support?
Support.
Supported by Ms. Hammond. Ready to vote. Ms. Mitchell?
Yes.
Ms. Hammond?
Yes.
Mr. Knight?
Yes.
Mr. Kittle?
Yes.
Mr. Burmeister?
Yes.
Ms. Verbecki?
Yes.
McDaniel votes yes. Motion passes 7-0. Ms. Mitchell? Do you have another motion?
No, thank you.
Oh, okay. Does anyone else have another motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Verbecki?
I move to authorize the city manager to purchase the property commonly known as 1761 North Updike Road, property identification number 1414304-014, in the amount of $10,184.59, and to execute all documents on behalf of the city related to the purchase, up to including those necessary to close the sale and obtain title insurance.
All right, moved by Ms. Verbecki. Do we have support?
Support.
Supported by Mr. Burmeister. Ready to vote? Ms. Verbecki?
Yes.
Mr. Burmeister?
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell?
No.
Mr. Knight?
Yes.
Ms. Hammond?
No.
Mr. Kittle?
No.
Yes. Mr. Burmeister? McDaniel votes yes. Motion passes 4-3. Did I count that right? Yep. Yes, you did. Okay. Did you? Okay. All right. With that, final motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Knight?
I'll move to authorize the city manager to purchase the land at 3424 Park Lawn Street, property identification number 1425382-003, in the amount of $17,322.88, and to execute all documents on behalf of the city related to the purchase, up to and including those necessary to close the sale and obtain title insurance.
Support.
Okay, moved by Mr. Knight, supported by Ms. Verbecki. We're ready to vote. Mr. Knight?
Yes.
Ms. Verbecki?
Yes.
Ms. Hammond?
No.
Mr. Kittle?
No.
Mr. Burmeister?
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell?
No.
McDaniel votes no. Motion fails. 3-4.
No.
Okay, with that, motion for adjournment moved by Mr. Kittle, supported by Ms. Verbecki. All in favor?
Aye.
Those that oppose? All right. Meeting is adjourned. Mr. Kittle, supported by Ms. Verbecki. All were in favor.